Yes guys, welcome back to another Fantasy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho, and in today's video we are going to be looking at some premium alternatives in the game. I really do believe the likes of Mo Salah and Saka do have players that are equally good FPL value that we need to consider for our Game Week 1 teams. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, please do make sure you drop a like and of course smash that subscribe button ahead of the new season. Without further ado, let's get into these alternatives to those premiums. So first and foremost, I need to state that premiums in the game are premiums for a reason. They are the best options in the game. And over the course of a 38 game week season, I do truly believe that the premiums, the most expensive of the ones that we're going to be looking at, will outscore their counterparts. However, FPL just isn't like that. If we could own all of the premiums with a limited budget, then we would do so. But we only have 100 million. So I do think sacrifices need to be made somewhere. Otherwise, we would just have all of the premiums in the game. So I do believe that when we need to look at these alternatives, we need to understand their price point. Are we saving money, which all of these will offer some savings? And also, do they actually provide FPL value, or is it worth just spending that little bit more and getting the premium to it? So first and foremost, we're going to be looking at Arsenal, and Saka, of course, being the premium in that Arsenal team at 10 million. Martin Odegaard is the one that I do think offers some great FPL value at 8.5 million. Now, of course, we have the likes of Kai Havertz at 8 million, but being a forward is a slightly more difficult way to compare him against Saka, and Martinelli could prove to be amazing FPL value, but at 7 million, I actually need to see him deliver before I can actually have the confidence to invest in someone like Martinelli. So take a look at the underlying numbers for these two players. You can see here that first and foremost, Saka does run away in each and every underlying stat. So in terms of goals per 90, 0.49, a really good season for Saka. Odegaard, on the other hand, 0.23 goals per 90. And I think when we are looking at last season, I do think Odegaard, for his own standards, while he was one of the players of the season, I don't think from an actual goal scoring perspective or chance creation perspective, it was one of his best seasons to date. I do think that we saw Odegaard come a little bit deeper at times to help build up with Arsenal, just because they were lacking that left-sided midfielder at times to help take the weight away from him. So I'm expecting going into this season a more advanced Odegaard with Arsenal's recruitment in the midfield, hopefully with Real Sociedad's midfielder coming in. But in terms of XG, again, Saka leads the way at 0.48 compared to Odegaard's 0.21. Saka was on penalties. So when we take a look at XG non-pen, it does come down to more 0.38, but still Saka leads the way there. And as I mentioned, I think we always associate Odegaard being the creator in this Arsenal team. And while he is, Saka also took that responsibility with 0.33 expected assists. So Saka was basically doing everything for Arsenal last year. He was the goal scorer, he was the chance creator, and naturally hogged a lot of the bonus points as well. And as you can see, his FPL points per 90 was more than that of Odegaard. So when we take a look at the underlying numbers, first and foremost, it is a 1.5 million saving. It's going to be the least saving of the other players that we're going to be looking at later on in this video. And of course, with Saka being on penalties, the fixtures coming up, Wolves at home, Villa away, Brighton at home, Spurs away. I think some people are looking at those opening fixtures thinking maybe they can avoid Arsenal altogether. I think if you're in a position right now where you're looking to do an early wild card, then an Arsenal attacker is almost essential in your FPL teams. And a lot of people were talking about Saka maybe not being available for game week 1, but we know what Arteta's like. He's always going to play Saka, and it's worth noting he did come off the bench against Bayern Leverkusen, so I think there is no issues about Saka starting in game week 1. For me, I do think Odegaard is a good alternative to Saka, but of all of the players that we're going to be looking at in this video, I think this is the one where with 1.5 million saving, I would actually rather just try and find the 1.5 million and get yourself Saka in the team. Being on penalties, you can see with the underlying numbers that he is considerably better than that of Odegaard. Yes, we might see an increase in Odegaard's numbers going into game week 1, but until we actually see it, I would actually rather you find 1.5 million and just get Saka in at that 10 million price point. However, if you're building a draft with Haaland and Salah, I think it's very difficult to also have Bukayo Saka there. So if that is the case, and you can only afford Odegaard, I do think his numbers will improve this season. So I don't think he's a bad investment at all for your teams. But I do prefer Bukayo Saka. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's move into the next alternative, which is going to be, of course, at Chelsea. So the two players that we're looking at here is going to be Nkunku and Cole Palmer. And before we get into that, I need to say that all of the numbers that you're seeing here is taken, of course, from fantasyfootballfix.com. You can check out the link in the bio. And importantly, with less than a week until the Game Week 1 deadline, we are having team reveals from some of the elite managers in the world. So you can check that out over on fantasyfootballfix.com. So these guys have all had consistent top 10k finishes, and they are some of the best managers in the world. So head over to the link in the bio to check out how their teams are looking ahead of Game Week 1. I certainly have been doing it myself. So looking at the comparison here between Nkunku and Cole Palmer, first caveat that we need to mention is, of course, Nkunku played very limited minutes last season. Only played around 300 or 400 minutes due to his injuries, whereas Cole Palmer played majority of the season beyond Game Week 5 and was obviously the talisman in that Chelsea team. So remember, when we're looking at these numbers, we do have to take it with a little bit of pinch of salt with Nkunku in particular. However, whereas with Odegaard and Saka, I spoke to you and said 1.5 million, I think I'll just rather find the 1.5, maybe sacrifice a defender and get yourself the better option. At Chelsea, there is a £4 million difference. And this is when we really need to understand about price saving in FPL. Because, of course, I think Cole Palmer over the course of the season is a better option than Nkunku. But when we're looking at £4 million saving and what that can do to bolster the rest of your squad, I think this is where we need to really take in consideration those player price points. So in terms of the numbers, goals per 90, what is really, really impressive with Cole Palmer is that he played all of the season and still maintained a goal per 90 of 0.75. Now, of course, he was on penalties. That is a big factor, but I don't think penalties is something that we can actually look at in terms of a negative manner. Any player that is on penalties naturally makes them a better option by default. And Chelsea just so happen to be one of those teams that actually rack up a lot of penalties. I think because the certain players they have, those 1v1 dribblers and the likes of Sterling, Nkunku, obviously Madueke on the right wing. I do think penalties is going to be a consistent thing in Chelsea again this season. And in terms of the XG per 90, again, Cole Palmer at 0.58. But Nkunku's numbers are fantastic. But again, under a very, very small sample size. 0.62 goals per 90, 0.52 XG per 90. And also what we did see with Nkunku is when he was in that Chelsea team, he was basically being the goal scorer in that team, whereas Cole Palmer remained a chance creator. So when we look at the fixtures coming up, Man City at home isn't ideal, but if there ever was a time to play Man City, it probably is now while they still have some of their key players unavailable. Wolves away, followed by Palace at home, and then Bournemouth away. I think the fixtures aren't as good as everybody's making out. I think Wolves away and Bournemouth away are tricky fixtures, but long term, Chelsea definitely is a team that you would want to invest in from an attacking perspective. I think we've seen enough from Maresca's team in pre-season to note that they're going to be very, very flaky defensively, but offensively they are creating chances, and I do think they are consistently going to score goals under Maresca. Now, when we look at the two, this is a perfect example. Cole Palmer is the better option if they were both priced at the same price point, but I think Nkunku is the man to go for in Game Week 1. Cole Palmer's played 0 minutes during pre-season at the time of recording. I do expect him to come into this Game Week 1 team, but Nkunku has played pretty much all of the minutes in pre-season. It looks like Maresca really trusts him in this team, and I think Nkunku's minutes are going to be as good as Cole Palmer's this season. And for a $4 million saving for a player who is an elite finisher, I'd put him on the same bracket as Cole Palmer. I think the Chelsea decision is quite a comfortable one here, where you invest in Nkunku, knowing that if Cole Palmer does hit the ground running, maybe an early wildcard is the way to squeeze him back into your teams. Or maybe you go for Bukayo Saka as your premium alongside Nkunku, knowing that maybe if you really need to get Palmer, you do Saka to Cole Palmer once the fixtures get bad for Arsenal. So for me, it is quite clear Nkunku is the man to invest at Chelsea. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So just a recap, of course, at Arsenal, I think you do pay the extra to get Saka. At Chelsea, I think you do pay the cheaper and go for Nkunku. I think Liverpool is the most difficult one to compare right now. So Mo Salah, of course, being the premium at 12.5 million. And we have a really interesting price saving here with Diogo Jota at 7.5 million. I do think Szoboszlai is interesting at 6.5, but I need to see a bit of clarification on where he's going to play in this Liverpool team. But I think Diogo Jota is the natural replacement to Mo Salah if you are looking to avoid him. Now, when we take a look at the underlying numbers, again, Jota did play less minutes than Mo Salah, but considerably more than the likes of Nkunku. So I think we can come to some sort of conclusions on his numbers. Goals per 90, we know when Jota plays, he scores goals. He isn't necessarily the most gifted footballer, but he knows where the net is. 0.78 goals per 90 compared to Mo Salah's 0.64. And a reminder, obviously, Jota has no penalties in this. Mo Salah does take into account penalties. XG per 90, 0.76 compared to Jota's 0.46, kind of highlighting Jota's finishing ability, to be honest with you. And in terms of assists per 90, Jota putting up some really good numbers at 0.55 compared to Mo Salah's 0.43. In terms of big chances, we always know Mo Salah is going to dominate them in that Jurgen Klopp team. And I think that's the big thing right now when we're looking at Liverpool. Similar to Chelsea, we have so many uncertainties right now, how the team are going to react off the back of Jurgen Klopp leaving, who is actually going to be the talisman in this Arne Slot team, because I know Mo Salah is still by default Liverpool's best attacker, and it would make sense for Arne Slot to build the team around Mo Salah, but equally, I think Arne Slot is coming into this team with his own philosophy and a way of playing, and it doesn't necessarily mean that Mo Salah is by default just going to be the go-to forward in this Liverpool attack. I know he's the most expensive, but he's the most expensive based on his time under Jurgen Klopp. And under Arne Slot, we may see maybe someone like Diogo Jota playing as a number 9, be the go-to man in this Liverpool attack. And again, this is the biggest saving of all of them. £5 million saving is huge when we're looking to balance our squads out, especially if you are going to go for Erling Haaland in your team. And again, it's worth noting, if you are going to avoid Mo Salah, you almost certainly need to have Erling Haaland as your main price premium asset. So for me, the fixtures are good for Liverpool. Ipswich away in game week 1, Brentford at home, followed by United and Nottingham Forest. I think it's quite a scary prospect to go without Mo Salah long term, and I do think in terms of the short term, maybe going for someone like a Diogo Jota and saving that money might actually be a wise move. We know the numbers are good, but we don't really have any certainty about how they're going to roll out their team week in, week out. I would probably say Jota is more of a rotation risk, whereas Mo Salah looks like he's always going to have that right-hand side lockdown. Jota is going to be competition with Darwin Núñez, with Gakpo, even someone like a Szoboszlai if they look to maybe play a false 9 in this system. But for a short term, if you're looking to maybe wildcard in game week 4 with that brilliant home fixture against Nottingham Forest, I think maybe taking a punt on Diogo Jota is actually the route to go for. Understand whether Mo Salah truly is the talisman of that Liverpool team. And if he is, then of course, wildcarding in game week 4, you can bring Mo Salah back into your squads. The other argument, of course, is that if you go for Mo Salah and Jota becomes the talisman, it's a much easier transition for you to just do with a free transfer. Salah down to Jota and maybe postpone the wildcard later down the line. So for me, with this, I don't really know what we're going to get with either of these two assets. I think if you're wildcarding in game week 4, I would take the punt on Jota at a cheaper price and invest the money elsewhere. If you're looking at a longer term wildcard, it's so difficult to go from Jota to Salah. I think by default, you go for Mo Salah knowing that you can downgrade to Diogo Jota. And of course, this one is probably the closest of the two. And I really do think that Jota offers amazing value, but it's just whether you're brave enough to swing against Mo Salah. So I think this one is a little bit dependent on when you wildcard, as I've discussed. So to conclude, I think you pay the little bit extra and you get Bukayo Saka in your team. I think Nkunku is clearly the better value pick than Cole Palmer. And this one is all about your wildcard horizon. For me, I think Jota is a great short-term punt. So that is going to conclude the premium alternatives in this video today, guys. I really hope it did provide some value and a little bit of food for thought with that deadline being on Friday. As always, everything you're seeing here is taken from fantasyfootballfix.com. You can check it out in the bio. And as I mentioned, this is the time to be checking yourselves against some of the best managers in the world. And you can do that over on fantasyfootballfix.com in the elite team reveal section. Do head over there and check it out. That should leave me to say, have an amazing day. Make sure you do drop a like on the video and smash the subscribe button. And I will see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.